the previous decade. That was like a major deal in like terms of it, though like they didn't really use it. But like the law was now useful under Teddy Roosevelt because he suddenly started enforcing the law itself, which said trust couldn't exist. And he went to court and fought these trusts and successfully got a lot of them out, including Standard Oil and like all those trusts. He trust split them and like JP Morgan and all those. And then like he only went after bad trusts. Good trusts like he believed were like regulating the economy. They were actually keeping fair prices. So like he's just doing that in general. So like he wasn't going after all trusts. But still he was a trust buster. Like he was in general a different person than thing other presidents at the time. Like he used something called the bully pulpit, which was like directly addressing the American, and it's like American civilians. Like it's before the presidency was just president just didn't interact as much with Americans. Like they didn't go on like heavy campaign rallies, and like in campaigning really didn't take a lift till like later in America. Or like you see those big campaign rallies that are now there for Trump and Biden and all those. But back then it wasn't like that. But like Theodore Roosevelt communicated directly to the people, not just letting their like local representatives communicate them. He directly communicated, and like many people saw what his ideas were, and like they saw him. And like in general, like Theodore Roosevelt was seen as this tough guy and like tough guy who was unlike a lot of people like that image of him. So like and like Theodore Roosevelt that didn't stop there what he did. Like there's a book called the jungle here. So like the this was like a book written by Upton St. Clair. So like he was Upton St. Clair was like a social reformer himself. And like the jungle like it was it was basically targeted one of the major industries that were thing. It was like the meat packing industry in Chicago. So like he basically worked undercover there for like a month, for like 12 months or something before he quit and started writing his book. And like he noticed lots of problems. His main problem he noticed was like unfair working conditions in the factory, though like and then he tried to expose those. But like what the many people thought that came out of this book, including the president, and was how he described how the meat was handled. Like he told like rats were eating the meat, it was often cold and liquidy, and there's lots of bacteria in it, and like it was there's dirt rubbed all over it. It was like terrible, and like many people were shocked that this was the food that they were eating in their home. So like there's widespread care, and like Theodore Roosevelt himself ordered some people to investigate the plant, and which they did, which confirmed basically what Upton St. Clair said of all the horrible condition there. So like there is so like in order to do that, he passed the two acts, mainly the Food and Drug Inspection an act, which basically like in made sure like foods and drugs were like properly labeled with like an expiration date, with like they make sure that all the ingredients are there, like all those labelings came out of this act in there. And then it also created the FDA, which was the Federal Drug Administration, which regulated drugs in the country. So like that was the first step in the right direction. And then like the Meat Inspection Act, which is specifically targeted towards meat, and they put stricter regulations on that. That then like made sure that industry doesn't like abuse any of it. And like Upton's while like that black while those the jungle led to those acts, like Upton St. Clair was mainly targeting like the working conditions itself, like how they were treating workers there's there. So like that was like the thing that was mainly upsetting for him, because like there's not as much At least not now, but like there isn't the public didn't see the working conditions as bad as like those meat things. So like that is the thing. So like that is what the thing. And then like Theodore Roosevelt also led conservation efforts, which was basically like make preserving the environment and stuff remain pristine beauty. So like by then like these big corporations were coming and they were emitting a lot of fossil fuels and stuff of and making unclean air and stuff throughout in cities in the East Coast and like some of the national parks were already getting exploited for it. Like Niagara Falls was in New York arc. It's basically the American side was looted with like lots of it was a mess then. Like it was like the water wasn't clean, nothing was really that, and like they were just polluting it. So like many people doesn't want that to happen in like the Western United States, which only recently started getting civil. It's because like the closing of the front here, like in 1880, 1890s, they were ending the front. Those were the ending of like expanding it in the continental US. And like many areas are now getting starting to get settled in that area. So like they wanted to preserve those lands. So Theodore Roosevelt was also a major conservationist, and he created the US Forest Service, which managed forests. And then like the national park, which was all per service, which was already there. He added five more national parks, and he added he added like fishing reserves. He had to regulate fishing and like let fish grow naturally, and then like he added a lot of stuff to the U.S. conservation efforts, and like in the end, he added an area like two times the size of Texas is the into federal protection, meaning like like resources can still be extracted out of those areas, but like there's a limit on how much you could, and like some areas resources cannot be extracted. So like it's kind of paved the way for like none of and like trust like these guys, there's trust. They're like all those monopoly trust, bribery, like Theodore Roosevelt in general cracked down on corruption, like we talked about trust busting already. And in general, like bribery and like all that, it went down like and like voter turnout went down because of the and like because like in the 18 late eras of the Gilded Age, it was like voter turnout, meaning like how many voters actually are present. It was high because like companies often bribe their workers, like political machines often bribe people to vote for them in exchange for it. And like sometimes there were there's lots of fraud, like multiple people voting for the thing, and then like there's multiple people, the same person voting in different times. Like there was like a lot of those fronts. So like that's why the voter turnout was high. And like the secret ballot was made in the early 1900s, which was like basically, or like you could call it the Australian ballot, but because Australia made it first, but like the secret ballot basically he made voters more private, voting more private because like it would be happening in a closed booth. Like no one it would be in front of you giving you no one can be in front of you. You have to give your own individual vote. And like a lot of like the bribery schemes for voting were also made illegal. So like companies were not able to bribe workers. And then like with no incentive to vote, many chose not to vote and like voter turnout declined in this era. So like it was good thing because there's less fraud, but like it was also less votes right, in general. And then like there's also some like we talked about how like the southern states now went to like Jim Crow era, and like basically that's like laws that prevented African Americans from receiving equal facilities to white people. And like it was even existing in northern areas, whether it's through companies or like people not wanting only white people to buy their homes or properties. So like that was like informal. It was less it was better to live in the north than in the south for African American people, though like still it was very tough as well. It's like this is formed in 1909, the NAACP. And like what this was like basically an organization that tried to use the court and like try to gain equal rights for African Americans. And then like it took some time for them to become successful. They eventually led lots of major cases like Brown v. Board, which outlawed school discrimination in schools, but like that was later in 1950s. Right now, like 1909, it was just created. It was formed by wealthy white lawyers who supported the movement and like black lawyers as well. So like it was to create equality. And like they got their first victory in like 1915 when like the grandfather clause, which basically because basically back then there was something called the poll tax in the South that prevented African Americans from voting because African Americans were poor or so like they couldn't afford the tax that was to voting again and like but like there was also poor white people as well. That was the problem they realized in the South. So like they created something called the grandfather clause, which like if your grandfather voted, you could vote. And like, but the problem with that clause is that the grandfathers of white people they were not enslaved, so they could vote. But like the grandfathers of black, they were enslaved, so like they couldn't vote. So like white people's grandfathers, they were able to vote since they were not enslaved. But like African Americans' grandfathers, they weren't. But like the Supreme Court ruled that illegal because it's it's really it's really self-explanatory why that should be illegal. So like that's like what happened there. So like that was a major turning point there. And like 1908, Roosevelt left office and he handpicked his successor, William Howard Taft, to come to replace him, and like and William Howard Taft continued some of his policies and differed in other policies. So like he continued the court battle against major trusts and he got some major victories as well through his court battle. Also, also like he continued Theodore Roosevelt and he actually was slightly more aggressive about those trusts. However, Theodore Roosevelt eventually would not be proud of him as like it would be found out as as like his like some of his ideas like conservation and was not taken as seriously by William Howard Taft, which upsets Theodore Roosevelt, which will eventually lead to a big election in 1912, which I'll talk about there. Finally, foreign intervention in 1900. So like here you can see the Panama Canal starting to be built. So like this is like a major canal here because on like from California to like New York, there's no major rivers in the US that like connected those two. Like it was the west and east were separated only by railroad you can like go through them at the time. And like railroad, it was pretty costly then, and like water transport is way cheaper to do. But like there like in order to transport by water, like you had to go all the way around South America. So like Theodore Roosevelt did not like that. So Colombia at the time controlled Panama, and like in the and then Theodore Roosevelt made Panama gain its own independence, and then like Theodore Roosevelt immediately started on this project called the Panama Canal, did the which basically connected the Gulf of the Caribbean Sea and the Gulf of Mexico with the Pacific Ocean. And like this will cut down time on US ships big time because they don't need to go to the southern end of South America. They can just go through Panama, which was like closer to the US. I said like this was basically a big deal in terms of how much, and then a lot of people died as well in this building, and like it started in 1902, eventually ending in 1914. And so like by then over 4,000 people were killed at the Panama Canal. And then like other foreign intervention, like the US maintained the like after the Spanish American War, the US gained lots of territory, including Cuba, Puerto Rico, and like the Philippines, which was like the first major US colony, I would say, because like there was another war with the Filipinos, local Filipinos, which ended in like 1904 or ending in 1904 or and like there was like lots of and then by then like as the US basically controlled the entire of the Philippines, but like and like eventually it would control it for like the next 40 years or something until 1946. So like that is something the US actually colonized some countries and like they pushed their social Darwinism ideas like and like try and continue to Christianize the Filipino country. And like Philippines is now one of the most Christian countries in the world right now because of that. And like the US, although they built schools, it's all they also treated the natives poorly. So like that's something there. And like the Rush and then like last note, Theodore Roosevelt got the Nobel Prize of Peace because he ended the war between Russia and Japan in 1906. So like that was something else there. And then like yeah. no- And like Theodore Roosevelt major influence and William Howard Taft continued and like his term continued into the 1910s, which like event which like eventually leads to like some chaos in this. So like 1910s was also pretty influential in terms of its effect on the US. So like this is the decade of World War II, but first like let's go to the 1912 election. So like Theodore Roosevelt was unhappy with William Howard Taft. So like and like he challenged him for the Republican Party nomination for president, and he lost to Taft in that. So like Theodore Roosevelt told he's gonna run as a third party candidate or like a third party aside from the two major parties, and he called it the Bull Moose Party, which further progressive ideas and stuff, and went more progressive than Taft. And like many Republicans supported him, but like they were split between their support of Roosevelt and Taft. And so like there was a Democrat that became president at the time, Woodrow Wilson, and he was able to win like enough states. But like the thing is if the Republicans had united, they would have beaten it because Woodrow Wilson only got like 43% of the vote. And like Roosevelt got like 30 and like Taft got like 25 or something. So like if you add those Roosevelt and Taft numbers because they were supporting Republicans both, it would be 55%. So like in the time the country still wanted a Republican president. So like the Democrat won because they split the vote in a lot of these states. It's like will Rod only Roosevelt and Taft were able to win some of these states, and like Wilson was able to win. Like in Wisconsin, he got 38% of the vote, and like he's still able to win. Like that's like an example there. So like that's like something there. And like Woodrow Wilson is shown here. He would be seen many people and like he continued some progressive ideas though like he also was a major and he also was like a bad in like lots of other ways, which we'll talk about. But like, yeah, basically, like that's what happened. So like Woodrow Wilson continued like some progressive ideas. He passed the Clayton Antitrust Act, which like went further than Sherman to regulate some of these trusts. And like he also was able to pass the Keaton Owens Act, which like banned child's labor, which was one of his major accomplishments during this era. It was struck down by the court, but they did another version and they were able to pass it. So like child labor was ending in America by then. However, and then like Woodrow Wilson's victories were at an end now because like he did a lot of bad things. Like furthermore, and like some of his made some one of his worst stuff is actually even he regretted the supporting this later. like was this. It was on movies began to start coming in American public life in this time. In 1915, there was a movie called The Birth of a Nation, in which basically was like a major movie movie that was basically arose like the Southern spirit, like during the Civil War, like the Confederate States here they were all like they were regaining pride, and like this movie basically was illustrating that, and like they were basically showing like the white man is superior and stuff, and like it was like all this major racism, all this stuff, and like it was leading to like renewed pride, and like many Confederate monuments and stuff were now being built in all of these places all of a sudden, because like the US the Union once it came back, they destroyed a lot of those in the 1870s as after the Civil War. But now since Pride is resurging, many of them were created. There's like the Daughters of the Confederacy, which made school textbooks different to illustrate history as different, and like it was all the stuff that still continues. It was all over. So like all these Confederate monuments were being built in the South, and then and like the wood and like Woodrow Wilson had nothing. He was even though he lived in New Jersey, he was in Virginia. He was born in Virginia, which was a true Southern state, and like he was having these Southern sentiments of racism and stuff, and like he even was given a quote on this film, and like he told how good this film was. That was this racist film, and like basically this arose the Ku Klux Klan again, and like this was not in the South only. The Ku Klux Klan was everywhere in the nation. Like the biggest place was in Indiana here, and like that was like a major thing. And like we talked about the 1920s, this Ku Klux Klan as well, but it really arose in the 1915 here. It was reemerged, and like it spread throughout the nation. It was attacking not only Black people but immigrants and Chinese workers and like Mexican Americans, all anyone that is not a Protestant, even Catholics and Jewish people, anyone that is not a Anglican Protestant white is attacked by them. So like that was a major bad thing that was happening, and lynchings they were lynching many African Americans during this time, which basically they hanged them on ropes over trees, and like they just leave them, and like many of them go scot many of those crimes go scot-free. Like the US doesn't care about those crimes because and like which led to them to do more, and like they were able to do it. So like that was a major thing that was happening here. Other than that, the major event that happened in the war is World War One. So like in 1914, there's conflict in Europe. Europe was at peace mostly for most of the time, but however, conflict was growing, and then eventually like there's this war, and like it was between the Allies, which was seen as the UK, France, Russia, and then eventually the US. So like the UK, France, Russia were the original thing, and then like Serbia as well, you can include, and then like also Italy is an ally. I forgot to mention that, and the ax and like the Central powers, or the Axis powers, that include Germany, Austria-Hungary, which at the time was a bigger country. It included us countries of Austria-Hungary and a bunch of other countries, and it also and the Ottoman Empire, or Turkey, modern day Turkey. So like it was a major conflict between those two. And like America was initially tried to stay a neutral view. Like Woodrow Wilson tried to make peace with everyone, but like it didn't work. Like America wanted to not be intervening in the war, but like there's some events that caused America to go into the war, which was including in 1915 there was a ship, and like it sank because of the German steamer called German submarine ship that called the German submarine ships called U-boats, which was basically attacking civilian ships. And like this Lusitania ship, the name of the ship was actually a British ship, and like Germans were like suspect they were hiding some weapons there. So like it was based, so they attacked it, and then like however, like in the ship there was 150 Americans on board or something, 159 Americans on board, which like really led to tension. And so like that was one thing. And then like the finally the Zimmerman telegram came from Germany. It basically told Mexico to attack the US because like Germany was fearing the US may join the war. So like if they have a war of its own like on Mexico, with Mexico it will be less likely. However, the British intercepted it and the US was able to see it, and like the US had their final straw, and like they started shipping troops to Europe. And like at the time Europe was pretty much in stalemate. So like that was like something there. Here, like US basically, and like it was all these trench warfares which took long time, which basically soldiers were in trenches and like they had to fight, and it was really slow to move and like stuff. So like that was the thing. And then the US was able to break through, and eventually they were able to push back onto Germany, and like that was able to do it there. And like the World War One on the home front, there was many acts that came, including the Sedition Act and the Espionage Act, which like as soon as many people were realized they were in war, they became patriotic about it. Like these war gardens were made, which was like victory gardens, because they wanted to save like farmer food, like grains and wheats, all for like the work workers, and like for like the soldiers and stuff who were fighting. So they made their own gardens and at their home, like then they produced their own vegetables to eat, and like some of them they even donated to the soldiers. So like that was something in there. And then like another thing, Espionage Sedition Act, they were cracking down on dissent. There's some opposition still to the war. So like these acts, although they violated free speech, they also did that. They also cracked down on the thing, and like that's another thing Woodrow Wilson did, and like he said propaganda. And like eventually the war was over, and like many people were believing, and like although and like many black people also fought for their country. However, they didn't get the same treatment as white people after World War One. Oh, and like it was mainly due to Woodrow Wilson and stuff. He was basically wanting to get world peace back. So like he created something called the 14 points, which basically wanted to give money to Germany to rebuild, wanted some territorial concessions. They wanted basically wanted peace. And like it was one of the ideas included the League of Nations, which was an earlier prototype of the UN. And like those policies, although good in nature, like they were not many people wanted to go to isolationism after the war, because many people, not a lot of Americans died, though still there's some considerable deaths. And like Woodrow Wilson was saying that's like too much, and like he was traveling across the country convincing them to not go otherwise, not be isolationist. But then he got a stroke, and then like he was basically incapable for the next 2 years as presidency. Like his wife was running everything during this time. Like the only thing he could do was sign. He was losing his ability to talk and stuff, so like that was something there. Or if he had convinced the country, it may have been different, 14 points. But like the 14 points League of Nations was seen as that, and like he tried to do it, but like it failed. And like yeah, and like Woodrow Wilson was seen as a good president for many years, but then we saw recently all this racism, so like that's led to him. So like
Anshit, we'll start a new window. It's 40 minutes.
I
Now
saw
it's
the
getting
time.
elapsed. Yeah, we'll start a new window.
All right, sir.
Yeah, just 1 minute remaining. So we will start a new window. Stop.
Okay. Okay, I'm gonna leave.